The courtroom was so quiet that even the soft hum of the air conditioner felt too loud. This wasn't a silence of people choosing not to speak. It was the silence that comes right before a life-changing decision, the kind where one sentence can destroy everything. For 3 days, the ex-wife had not spoken a single word. No defense, no tears, no explanation. Everyone believed the case was already over. But no one realized that her silence wasn't surrender. It was strategy. Before the story continues, one small request. If you enjoy real-life inspired courtroom stories, where silence becomes power, make sure to subscribe to the channel now. Because this story isn't just about divorce, it's about what happens when the person everyone underestimates decides to speak. Now let's begin. At the far end of the defense table sat Ava Reynolds, a simple gray dress, her hair pulled neatly back, no makeup, no jewelry. Her hands rested calmly in her lap, unmoving. 3 days had passed. For 3 days, Ava had remained completely silent, not when her character was attacked, not when she was called a financial burden, not when it was said she contributed nothing to the marriage. She didn't react. Across from her sat her ex-husband, Jason Reynolds, a perfectly tailored suit, relaxed shoulders, and the quiet confidence of a man who believed he had already won. Jason leaned toward his lawyer and whispered, "This is done. The judge has no choice." The lawyer gave a small, confident smile. She hasn't said a word. Silence usually means acceptance. The gallery seemed to agree. She's given up. She has nothing. This ends today. But what none of them understood was that Ava wasn't quiet because she was weak. She was quiet because she was waiting. Jason Reynolds believed this divorce was just paperwork. He had handed Ava the divorce papers on the worst day of her life, while she stood alone in a hospital hallway, waiting outside her mother's ICU room. That day, Jason had said only 6 words. "I'm done. I want out." Ava hadn't replied. In court, Jason's lawyer spoke with confidence. "My client built everything himself. The company, the home, the lifestyle. Mrs. Reynolds made no financial contribution." The judge glanced toward Ava. She didn't look up. Jason leaned back, satisfied. In his mind, the ending was already written. The gavel would fall. He would walk away clean. Judge Daniel Wright closed the file in front of him. The room grew even quieter. "Mrs. Reynolds," the judge said calmly, "you've been silent for 3 days." A pause. "Is there anything you'd like to say on your behalf?" This was the moment most people broke. They cried. They begged. They defended themselves. Ava did none of that. She took a slow breath. Then she stood. For the first time, the courtroom really looked at her. Her voice was soft, but steady. "Your Honor," she said, "I'd like to answer the question that hasn't been asked yet." A murmur spread through the room. Jason sat up straighter. The judge raised an eyebrow. "And what question would that be, Mrs. Reynolds?" Ava turned and looked at Jason for the first time in 3 days. Then she said, "Who actually owns my ex-husband's company?" The courtroom froze. Jason's confident expression faltered. Just for a second. The judge reopened the file. "Mr. Reynolds," he asked calmly, "can you explain your company's ownership structure?" Jason answered immediately, "I'm the founder. I own it." Ava spoke again quietly. "Are you sure?" The judge reached for a document that had been sitting in the file, untouched since the trial began, and in that moment, everything began to change. The judge didn't answer right away. He studied the document in his hand, then slowly looked back at Jason. Jason shifted in his chair. It was subtle, barely noticeable, but Ava noticed it. Judge Wright adjusted his glasses. "Mr. Reynolds," he said evenly, "this document shows that a private trust holds a significant portion of your company." Jason frowned. "That's normal, Your Honor," he replied quickly. "Standard tax planning." Ava remained standing. Her face was calm, her posture steady. "Your Honor," she said, "that trust isn't just for taxes." The courtroom leaned in. "It was created 8 years ago," Ava continued, 2 years after our marriage." Jason's lawyer stood up abruptly. "Objection. This has no relevance to—" "Sit down," the judge said without raising his voice. The lawyer hesitated, then sat. Ava continued, That trust holds 49% of Reynolds Tech. A low murmur spread through the courtroom. Jason's jaw tightened. That's impossible, he said sharply. I own the majority. Ava looked at him. No, she said softly. You manage it. Let out a short, nervous laugh. She doesn't understand how corporate structures work. The judge glanced back at the document. According to this, he said slowly, the beneficiary of the trust is listed as Ava Reynolds. The room went silent. Jason froze. What? He said. Ava didn't look at him. Yes, Your Honor, she said calmly. I'm the beneficiary. Jason stood so fast his chair scraped loudly against the floor. That's not true, he shouted. She's lying. The judge's voice dropped. Sit down, Mr. Reynolds. Jason hesitated, then sat. For the first time, his confidence was gone. The judge turned back to Ava. How did this trust come to exist, Mrs. Reynolds? Ava took a breath. 8 years ago, she said. Jason came to me with an idea. Jason stared straight ahead. He said he needed an investor, Ava continued. Someone quiet. Someone he could trust. The courtroom listened closely. He said outside investors would interfere, she went on, that the company needed protection. Jason's lawyer shifted uncomfortably. So I invested, Ava said. With what funds? The judge asked. My inheritance. Jason snapped his head toward her. You promised you'd never bring that up, he hissed. Ava looked at him. You promised you'd never betray me. The judge leaned forward. Your inheritance, he repeated. From whom? My father, Ava replied. Jason swallowed. No one in that courtroom knew much about Ava's family. Jason had always dismissed them as irrelevant. What did your father do? The judge asked. Ava paused, then answered. He was a silent partner in multiple private equity firms. The gallery erupted in whispers. Jason's lawyer stood again. Your Honor, this is turning into... Sit down, the judge said firmly. Jason's face grew pale. My father advised me to protect my investment, Ava continued. That's why the trust was created. The judge nodded. And who controls this trust? Ava met his eyes. I do. Jason stood again. This is insane, he shouted. She stayed home. She never attended meetings, Ava replied calmly. You never invited me. The courtroom fell silent again. The judge turned to Jason. Mr. Reynolds, he asked, were you aware your wife owned 49% of your company? Jason opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Finally, he said, no. The judge leaned back. Then we have a serious issue, Jason's lawyer whispered urgently to him. Jason shook his head, barely breathing. This can't be happening, he muttered. The judge closed the file. I'm ordering a full review of the trust, he said, effective immediately. Jason's face drained of color. And until then, the judge added, no assets are to be moved or sold. Jason looked at Ava. For the first time, he understood. Her silence hadn't been weakness. It had been control. The courtroom felt different now. Not louder, not chaotic, heavier. Jason sat frozen in his chair, his hands clenched so tightly that his knuckles had gone white. The confidence he'd walked in with was gone, replaced by something unfamiliar. Uncertainty. The judge turned another page in the file. Mrs. Reynolds, he said, the trust documents indicate voting rights attached to the shares. Can you explain that to the court? Jason's lawyer straightened, visibly tense. Ava nodded once. Yes, Your Honor, she said. The trust doesn't just hold equity. It holds voting control. A murmur rippled through the gallery. Jason's head snapped up. That's not possible, he said quickly. I've always controlled the board. Ava looked at him calmly. You chaired the meetings, she replied. That doesn't mean you controlled the votes. The judge raised his eyes. Explain. Ava took a breath. 4 of the 7 board members, she said, were appointed through recommendations tied to the trust. Jason shook his head in disbelief. They were my people, he said. They answered to me. They answered to stability, Ava replied. And stability came from the trust. Jason's lawyer leaned toward him, whispering urgently. Jason brushed him off. This is ridiculous, Jason said aloud. She never showed any interest in the business. She didn't even know what we did half the time. Ava didn't raise her voice. I knew enough to protect what I invested. The judge interjected. Mr. Reynolds, he said, did you ever ask your wife about the trust? Jason hesitated. No, he admitted. She never mentioned it. Ava answered quietly. You never asked. The courtroom. M went silent again. The judge looked down at the documents. According to these records, he said, the trust has veto authority on major financial decisions. Jason felt his stomach drop. That's impossible, he said. I signed off on every major deal. Ava nodded. Yes, she said. Because none of them crossed the threshold. Jason's lawyer frowned. What threshold? Ava met the judge's eyes. The one that would have required my approval. Jason stared at her. What are you talking about? Ava replied evenly. The sale. Jason's breath caught. The judge's gaze sharpened. What sale? Jason stood abruptly. There is no sale, he said. This is a fishing expedition. The judge raised a hand. Sit down, Mr. Reynolds. Jason hesitated, then slowly sat. Ava continued. 2 months ago, she said, Jason began negotiating a partial sale of the company. Jason's lawyer turned sharply toward him. You never told me that, he whispered. Jason ignored him. That deal wasn't finalized, Jason said quickly. Because it couldn't be, Ava replied. The judge leaned forward. Why not? Because the trust blocks any sale exceeding 20% equity, Ava said. And the deal Jason was negotiating involved 40%. The courtroom erupted. Jason shot to his feet. That's confidential information. Ava didn't flinch. It was, she said, until you tried to leave me with nothing. The judge banged the gavel once. Order. Jason looked around, his face pale. You planned this, he said to Ava. You waited. Ava answered calmly. I protected myself. The judge closed the file slowly. Mr. Reynolds, he said, did you disclose these negotiations to the court during these proceedings? Jason swallowed. No. The judge nodded. Then we have another issue. Jason's lawyer looked panicked now. This changes everything, he whispered. Jason felt the room closing in. He looked at Ava, searching her face for something. Anger, satisfaction, triumph. He found none, only calm. The judge spoke again. I am ordering immediate disclosure of all pending deals, he said, and a temporary suspension of executive authority. Jason's breath left him. What does that mean? He asked. The judge looked directly at him. It means, he said, you don't make decisions alone anymore. Jason slumped back into his chair. For the first time, he realized something he never had before. Ava hadn't stayed silent because she had nothing to say. She stayed silent because she already held the leverage, and she was just beginning to use it. The room felt colder after that. Jason sat back in his chair, staring straight ahead, as if refusing to look at Ava would somehow undo what had just happened. His lawyer leaned close, whispering urgently, flipping through notes that suddenly felt useless. The judge took off his glasses and rested them on the bench. Mr. Reynolds, he said, the court is now concerned not just with divorce proceedings but with potential non-disclosure of material facts. Jason cleared his throat. This is being blown out of proportion, he said, forcing his voice to stay steady. My wife was never involved in the company. She didn't work there. She didn't make decisions. Ava finally spoke again. I didn't need an office to be involved, she said. I needed foresight. The judge turned toward her. Mrs. Reynolds, he asked, why was none of this mentioned earlier in the proceedings? Ava answered without hesitation. Because until now, she said, no one asked the right question. Jason laughed once, sharply. So this was your plan? Sit quietly and ambush me? Ava looked at him. No, she replied. This was your plan. I just didn't stop you. The judge leaned back slightly, studying. Both of them. Mr. Reynolds, he said, did you ever inform your wife of your intention to sell a significant portion of the company? Jason hesitated. No, he admitted. It wasn't finalized. But you intended to, the judge said. Jason didn't respond. The judge nodded slowly. Intent matters, he said. Jason's lawyer stood again. Your Honor, he said carefully, we request a brief recess to consult with our client. The judge considered it. Denied, he said. This court needs clarity, not delay. Jason exhaled sharply. Ava remained calm, her hands folded in front of her. The judge turned another page in the file. There's something else, he said. The trust documents indicate a contingency clause. Jason stiffened. What clause? He asked. Ava's voice was quiet but clear. The clause that activates in the event of marital dissolution. The courtroom stirred. Jason turned toward her slowly. What does that mean? He asked. Ava met his eyes. It means, she said, that in the event of divorce initiated by you, my voting power increases. Jason's face drained of color. That's not possible, he said. I would have known. Ava replied calmly. You signed it. Jason stared at her. When? The night you told me, she said, that you trusted me more than anyone else. The judge looked at Jason. Is that accurate, Mr. Reynolds? Jason opened his mouth, closed it. Yes, he said finally. The judge nodded. Then the court recognizes that Mrs. Reynolds currently holds majority voting authority. The words landed heavily. Jason's lawyer whispered something urgently, but Jason didn't respond. He was staring at Ava now, truly seeing her for the first time. You let me think you were weak, he said quietly. Ava answered just as quietly. You needed me to be. The judge straightened. This court will suspend final divorce ruling until a full financial review is completed, he said. Additionally, temporary control measures will remain in place. Jason shook his head. This isn't how this was supposed to go, he muttered. Ava said nothing. She didn't need to, because for the first time since this trial began, Jason understood the truth. The woman he thought he was leaving behind was the one who had quietly built the exit door, and he had walked straight into it. The recess ended, but the tension didn't. If anything, it thickened. Jason returned to his seat looking smaller than before, his shoulders slightly hunched, his tie loosened without him realizing it. The man who had walked into court convinced he was in control now looked like someone trying to remember where things had gone wrong. The judge reviewed the updated notes in silence. Ava sat still, her expression unchanged. Jason finally broke it. You planned this, he said, his voice low but sharp. You let me believe I had everything. Ava looked at him. No, she said calmly. I let you believe what you wanted to believe. The judge cleared his throat. Mr. Reynolds, he said, this court is now reviewing not only ownership, but intent. Jason frowned. Intent to do what? To remove assets before final judgment. The judge replied. Jason's lawyer stiffened. That's an allegation, he said quickly. It's a pattern, the judge replied. And patterns matter. The judge looked toward Ava again. Mrs. Reynolds, he said, did you become aware of any attempts to move or hide assets? Ava nodded once. Yes, Your Honor. Jason turned toward her sharply. You never said anything, Ava replied quietly. I documented everything. The courtroom leaned in. When? The judge asked. Over the last year, Ava said. Wire transfers, shell accounts, deferred bonuses. Jason laughed nervously. She's guessing. The judge didn't look at him. Do you have proof, Mrs. Reynolds? Ava reached into her bag and placed a slim folder on the table. Yes. The bailiff took it and handed it to the judge. Jason's lawyer leaned toward him again, whispering urgently. Jason's face tightened. The judge opened the folder slowly. As he read, his expression changed. Mr. Reynolds, he said, did you authorize a transfer of $12 million to a private holding company 6 months ago? Jason swallowed. That was compensation, he said. Earned. The judge looked up. That holding company, he said, was dissolved 2 weeks later. Jason said nothing, and the funds were rerouted, the judge continued, to an offshore account. Jason's lawyer sat back, stunned. Ava spoke softly. That account was created after you told me you were thinking about leaving. Jason stared at her. You were spying on me. I was paying attention, Ava replied. The judge closed the folder. This court is placing a temporary freeze on all marital and corporate assets, he said, effective immediately. Jason stood up. You can't do that, he said. I still run the company. The judge met his eyes. For now, he said, but you no longer move money without oversight. Jason sat down heavily. The reality was settling in. He wasn't losing an argument. He was losing control. The judge leaned back. There's one final issue we need to address today, he said. Jason looked up. What now? The judge glanced at Ava. The prenuptial agreement. Jason exhaled slowly. That protects me, he said. She signed it. Ava nodded. I did. The judge looked between them. But the prenup contains an amendment, he said. One added after the trust was created. Jason's eyes widened. What amendment? Ava answered calmly. The one you never read. The judge closed the file. We'll address the T. Next, he said. Jason felt his stomach drop, because he suddenly understood something terrifying. The divorce he thought was ending today had only just begun. The courtroom had gone completely still again. Not the dramatic kind of silence filled with whispers and reactions. This was heavier, the kind that pressed down on everyone's chest. Jason stared at the judge. What amendment? He asked, his voice tighter than before. The judge didn't answer immediately. He flipped through the prenup, page by page, as if making sure every word was exactly where it should be. You signed this document, the judge said finally, 5 years ago. Both parties did. Jason nodded. Yes. It protects premarital assets. That's correct, the judge said. But it also includes a post-marital amendment. Jason's lawyer leaned forward. Your Honor, he said carefully, my client was never informed of. The judge raised a hand. He was informed, he said. He signed it. Jason shook his head. That's not possible, he said. I would remember. Ava spoke calmly. You were distracted, she said. You had just closed your biggest funding round. Jason turned toward her. You slipped something in. Ava met his eyes. I offered protection, she said. You accepted it. The judge looked down again. This amendment states, he read, that any attempt to conceal, divert, or transfer marital or corporate assets in anticipation of divorce constitutes a breach. Jason's jaw clenched. And in the event of a breach, the judge continued. The non-breaching spouse is entitled to full enforcement rights. Jason swallowed. What does that mean? He asked. The judge looked up. It means, he said, the prenup no longer limits Mrs. Reynolds' claims. Jason's lawyer went pale. That would invalidate the entire agreement, he said. The judge nodded. That's correct. Jason stood up slowly. No, he said. That can't be right. Ava watched him quietly. The judge continued. The amendment further states that in such a case, all trust-held interests revert to joint marital consideration. Jason felt the floor shift beneath him. You're saying, he said slowly, she gets half. The judge corrected him. No, he said. I'm saying she gets leverage. Jason turned toward Ava. You did this, he said. You planned for me to fail. Ava shook her head. I planned for reality, she said. You just confirmed it. The judge leaned forward. Mr. Reynolds, he said, this court now has reason to believe assets were moved in anticipation of divorce. Jason's lawyer whispered urgently, but Jason didn't respond. And based on the trust structure, the judge continued, Mrs. Reynolds currently holds operational influence. Jason's voice cracked. So what happens now? The judge paused. Now, he said, we investigate. Jason sat down heavily. The man who once believed this divorce would be quick and clean now looked like someone watching his own future collapse in slow motion. Ava remained still. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't angry. She didn't need to be, because everything Jason feared losing had already slipped beyond his control, and the final decision hadn't even been made yet. The courtroom felt smaller than before. Jason sat motionless, staring at the table in front of him, as if the polished wood might offer answers. His lawyer whispered something, but Jason didn't react. The words no longer mattered. Judge Wright straightened in his seat. Mr. Reynolds, he said, this court has reviewed the trust, the asset transfers, and the amended prenuptial agreement. Jason slowly lifted his head. Based on the evidence, the judge continued, this court finds that Mrs. Reynolds acted within her legal rights to protect her investment. Jason's throat tightened. And, the judge added, that Mr. Reynolds attempted to move assets in anticipation of divorce. The words landed like a verdict, even before the gavel fell. Jason shook his head. I built that company, he said quietly. From nothing. Ava spoke for the first time in a long moment. You built it, she said. I made sure it survived. The judge looked at her. Mrs. Reynolds, he said, your silence throughout these proceedings was unusual. Ava nodded. I didn't need to speak, she replied. The documents speak better than I ever could. The judge allowed a brief pause. Effective immediately, he said. This court grants Mrs. Reynolds shared control of Reynolds Tech pending final settlement. Jason's lawyer closed his notebook. There was nothing left to write, and, the judge continued, any attempt to bypass this order will result in immediate sanctions. Jason exhaled slowly. So that's it, he said. I lose everything. The judge corrected him. No, he said. You lose the illusion that you owned everything. Ava stood. Not in triumph, not in anger, just calm. She looked at Jason one last time. You thought my silence meant I had nothing, she said. It meant I was finished explaining myself. Jason didn't reply. He couldn't. The judge raised the gavel. This court is adjourned. The sound echoed through the room. Ava turned and walked toward the exit. The reporters rushed forward, questions flying, cameras flashing, but she didn't stop. She had spent years being unheard. Today, silence had finally spoken for her. And Jason Reynolds learned a lesson he would never forget. Never underestimate the person who stays quiet when they have every reason to scream, because silence, when used right, can change everything.